All right, thank you so much, Pearl. And hi, I got a brief introduction here, so let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Brand Innovators Livecast, where we talk all things marketing innovation, and we strive to think outside of the box. I am Skip Wilson, as Pearl mentioned. I'm Vice President of Brand at Shutterstock. We are the creative platform of choice for folks looking to tell their best story. And I'll be moderating a fireside chat today with Wealthy Desai, Assistant Vice President of Content Strategy and Experimentation at AT&T. Wealthy is a self-described technology fanatic and an e-commerce expert. His main goal is to fuel innovation, ideation, and test strategies through creative design. He has a rich background in development, analytics, sales, and marketing, chat, call center operations, and product development. He also is a film and TV buff and drops quotes from movies from Seinfeld into a conversation frequently. So hopefully, Wealthy, you can give us some of those I was in the pool comments a little bit later on. So we're helping to hear some Kramerisms today. A little bit about myself. I currently serve as Vice President of Brand at Shutterstock, where I'm responsible for leading the company's global brand and creative strategy and producing results-driven world-class activations to further build our affinity and awareness, such as Pearl mentioned at Cannes. Actually, that was our enterprise team, and shout out to Selena for making us look as great as we do. Before this role, I was head of global brand and corporate marketing at Peloton Commercial, with prior experiences from retail to e-commerce to trade to content at Sony, Ralph Lauren, and MTV. So we're going to jump into our conversation. We have kind of three areas that we're going to dive into. And the first one is innovation. And obviously, looking at someone from AT&T and in content strategy, I want to get Wealthy your thoughts on innovation. It has become a buzzword and maybe a bit of a cliche as we all drop into our marketing messages. How do you define innovation?
Yeah, so that's a great introduction, Skip. Thanks for setting that up, setting the stage so well for us. And I think this dialogue is intriguing to me because, we talk about innovation, as you said, is a cliche. But I mean, at the heart of it, I believe in innovation as problem solving, right? We see an opportunity. It could be small, it could be big. And not every day we see inventions like iPhone come to life and say, okay, we're going to change the whole world. I think at the heart of this, as I have kind of progress through my career, every opportunity I've seen is in terms of problem solving, whether it be a software code or a design problem. And AT&T with the size of the organization and the amount of traffic we get, what we have seen is a small change or small opportunity that we move the needle on has a pretty significant impact in our bottom line numbers. And that's what is the best part of my job. With some of the things that I've done in the past, coming from an engineering background and, working in analytics and now into design, I think the impact of design at the top of the funnel and impact of that, small change it has on the numbers and the bottom line is just fascinating. So that's what I would say at the heart that, we practice at AT&T within my organization, and we kind of encourage ideas coming from everywhere and develop innovation in terms of problem solving.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting response because a lot of times, we as brand people, we think of innovation of having to be this big idea, right? This big concept. And it sounds like you really take an iterative, strategic approach toward building that innovation into how you develop and go to market.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I really liked about Jeff Bezos once he talked about the door swings, and there are some doors which kind of swing one way, there are some which kind of swing both ways. And I think when we talk about that one-way swing door, it's like a large investment we would make as a corporation, right? Acquisition or merger, or a big bet like Tesla would make and say that we're going to make electric cars and change the world. And it's a huge investment. It could go one way or the other. And I think the approach that I've taken in my organization is mostly around iterative, right? Like the door swings both ways. We take small iterative approach, we learn through that, and we say, okay, did this investment pay off? And now we scale up. And we are seeing tremendous results with this approach. We are seeing amazing numbers and great number of experiments that win. And the bets we are taking, especially in the e-commerce space, is just paying off in a big way. So I'm very proud of the things that we are doing here at AT&T.
And how do you maybe ground or focus, if you're dealing with a large team, right? Innovation and how you iterate can mean so many things to different people, right? Some people may innovate around customer experience, some around product experience, some around UX, UI. There's so many ways to think about innovation. How do you ensure that your team is moving together?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I think the key here is diversity, and we can touch more about upon that. Let's skip. The one thing that I've seen is when I was studying engineering, we would get these problems from our professors, and the ask would be, well, how can you solve it? And the advantage of learning engineering is that you're learning like 30 subjects in a course of 3 years, and that allows you to kind of develop that perspective that, okay, how can you approach a problem solving solution, and how do you approach that from many different angles. Sometimes you apply thermodynamics, and sometimes you apply mechanical principles, and sometimes you apply the design principles, and so forth. And I think one thing that I have seen, or I really cherish in this organization, is that we have designers, and we have strategists, and we have engineers, and we have QA, and we have analytical people who can all bring their perspective. And I think these cross-functional pods, as I define, have brought tremendous amount of velocity, tremendous amount of innovation, and I think different perspective in terms of diversity is what is kind of driving the engine for us.
Awesome. One of the things that I have to remind myself continually is not to be so focused on my particular industry or my particular task or my particular niche, because, naturally as a creative, I should be drawing inspiration and really looking at trends and looking at other industries from around the globe, for my walks to work or whatever, and maybe taking some of those ideas and concepts and bringing them into my organization. And that's kind of how I have started to think about innovation. It's not necessarily net new as innovation, but it's taking something and maybe using it in a different way and applying it in a different context.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that fascinates me with respect to e-commerce is like the global nature of it. We see these e-commerce practices being kind of adopted in many different ways. In my recent visit to India, one of the things I saw, Skip, was how effectively they use WhatsApp as an app to do customer service, and at a very global level. So on the website, instead of putting a chat with us or talk to us, it's like a WhatsApp number. And they are very, very responsive on that. I saw KLM, Air France do the same kind of thing, and very, very responsive. So they're using WhatsApp as a very effective platform to serve their customers, above and beyond the social media platforms we see on Pinterest and Facebook. So I would say that driving and learning from different industries, like it's you talked about the movies, and I believe in the quote, life is like a box of chocolates, from Forrest Gump, and I feel like if we get inspirations from different industries, it can be really fascinating. What we can learn from Nike or Ralph Lauren and adopt to a commercial business like AT&T.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So this is all the upside of innovation, all the benefits and the good stuff. What happens when innovation goes wrong or we make a misstep?
Yeah, that can cost dearly, right? And I think the approach that we practice here at AT&T is at a high level, right? Before we make big bets, we definitely take risks. We definitely take risks in smaller chunks. And when innovation goes wrong, before we get there, there are lessons that we want to learn upfront, and it does take some investments, right? And it does take risk-taking behaviors. It does take somebody sticking out their neck and saying that, yeah, I'm going to kind of apply this and see what results come out of it. So at a high level, the typical S curve in a product development lifecycle is what we practice. We try something out, we scale it up if the experiment wins, and then we see the monetization, and then eventually the product deprecates. And I think we have become conscious. I wouldn't say that we have adopted it at a global level, but I think at a high level, we in pockets, we are kind of driving this rather than an entire organization moving in one direction. Like, we practice it in small pockets and see how we are taking bigger bets over a period of time.
Sure. And I think for me, it is I caught the tail end of the last session, and there was a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's actually the same quote that Brene Brown's book Daring Greatly uses in the opening of her book. And that book is really around vulnerability, but also creativity and innovation. And when we talk about innovation and we talk about risk taking and we talk about creativity, I believe my job is to facilitate that environment where people bring their best ideas, right, to work. And that requires a certain level of creating that safe space to really iterate, to really try the odd idea, obviously with constraints and guardrails, but, not being afraid to failure. And so I've learned to maybe focus on the learnings when you do try to innovate and something goes wrong or it's not the result that you had anticipated, but focus on the learning from that and then apply it to your next test.
I think that the the last part you touched upon, Skip, in terms of bringing the best in people and bringing from different diverse group of people is something that I strongly believe in. I do think that, going back to the engineering days, like, bringing different perspective and different points of views is so critical to problem solving. There is one person who can solve a problem, and when you give the same problem to three of them from different skill sets and different backgrounds, the outcome, you might get three different options, and then you suddenly kind of say, okay, there's a better option here to solve the same problem. It's really cool.
Okay, next topic, and I'm super interested in this topic is, obviously you are an e-commerce strategist, right? Heavily focused on probably driving traffic, conversion, surfacing the right content. For me, as a global brand, I'm focused on maybe top of the funnel marketing, right? Really kind of driving an emotional connection to our brand and making sure that you have a full funnel as you move people through conversion. Sometimes there is a bit of friction between how I might want to have a message on .com versus how you want to position a message on .com, or even what that experience looks like. How would you say brand can partner together with e-commerce to achieve those goals?
Yeah, so we have learned some of the lessons here, practicing innovation and practicing risk taking, and then working with the brand. And believe it or not, we get different ideas from many different sources, and sometimes the idea, the whole objective is that we want to challenge the status quo, right? And we want to take risks. But then at some point we kind of realize that, okay, we are going too far, or this may actually damage the brand. So we ensure that when we do the innovation, there are some guardrails we define and say, okay, these are the rules we are not going to bend. In some cases, it might affect our brand in a negative way. So there are some things, I wouldn't say that we innovate by committee, but we do kind of push each other, right? With respect to coming up with ideas, socializing them, and then promoting. And then somebody does have to play a Switzerland party and say that, hey, I think this is challenging the status quo, we should let it go. And the exposure is so little, right? So the whole idea of A/B testing or multivariate testing is that we are exposing an idea to a small group of customers, and it doesn't have to be always exposing to launching an idea and exposing it to the wide base of customers. We can do usability testing. There are green room testing that we do, and then we allow a new experience to be exposed to a specific group of customers, and we measure what impact it has on our experience, on our brand. And so we take risks, but we do take calculated risk, is how I would put it.
All right, went on mute there. What are some, I guess, in your opinion, and I'm always curious to get this insight from others outside my particular discipline, but what are some characteristics of successful brands? What does that look like for you?
I would say consistency, brand recognition, right? So especially when, for example, my kids would see the tick and they would say that's Nike, like without having to explain, having those words, and it just does brand recognition. And I think every single touch point, I think it's so critical that at every single touch point there is attention to detail, whether it be colors, the fonts, and the clarity of that. And I think having that experience, whether you are in a retail channel or a TV commercial, on the website, on an app, having that consistency is so critical. And then we have, as we sometimes when we work on rebranding projects, we realize that that whole change period is so long that it might actually negatively impact, and we go through reorgs or organizational changes and so forth. So it is important that when we do that in a calculated manner. We test it up front and then do it quickly so that it's not, it doesn't put us in a limbo state, too long.
Great. Okay, let's move on. So I want to make sure that we get to the other two buckets of content. The next one is obviously where you have expertise, and I want to talk about digital transformation and what that means for your organization. Obviously, you are in a very fast-moving industry. Technology moves really fast, and you need to iterate almost on the fly. How do you navigate the speed of change with digital transformation?
So, with digital transformation, the analogy we use is like, trying to fly the plane and rebuild the plane at the same time.
Yeah.
So, kind of have to rip out the engine and put a new engine and then put a new paint and new seats and all of it. And I think one of the lessons we have learned is, it has to start with people first, and then, tools and processes follow. So people, processes, and tools, you got to work on all the three aspects. But I think the cultural buy-in is the number one thing, like getting people energized that, hey, in this job, when you're coming into this organization, you're going to do two jobs. You're going to hit our quarterly numbers or monthly objectives, and we are going to work on transformation initiatives as well. Are you ready for that? And some people will say, nope, this is not for me. I'm not there. This is not for me. And that's fine. But having that upfront dialogue and being honest. So every single person that we have hired in the last 3 years, right, we're working on this digital transformation, we've been very upfront. And I think our hiring process has evolved quite a bit with respect to, me interviewing and my peers interviewing, and we kind of have a panel, and then all of us kind of provide that perspective that when you come in, you may be working with this particular supervisor, but you are accountable to a lot of your teams. And
Sure.
then you are kind of part of a larger ecosystem, and your role is going to be important and is going to impact a lot of jobs. I think one of the things that, recognizing that how my job impacts yours and your job impacts mine, and I have to understand part of your responsibilities and vice versa, plays a very significant role in driving that transformation. And then once we have that nailed and have a very solid foundation with the people bought in, I think the processes and tools are easier, right? Making the decisions on which tool to implement, what processes to change.
Sure.
But that initial part takes a lot of effort. And I think, especially in my organization, we started from scratch 3 years ago. We created an entire merchandising organization, and I think with respect to innovation and experimentation, we are on a tremendous velocity. I would say that, we got, when we started, we were managing a lot of the things in Excel files and tracking,
Right.
projects and budgets and so forth. And from that, we evolved into, cross-functional pods. We kind of defined in new processes. We trained our people. In some cases, we had to even change. Some people left the organization. We hired new people. We implemented new tools. And I'm proud to say, like, we are an award-winning studio, an internal organization to AT&T, and I'm proud of some of the things that we have done in the last couple of years.
Awesome. I think for me, because Shutterstock is going into its next iteration as well. And as we enter our next 20 years, we're expanding our offerings beyond our legacy content offering. It's a super exciting time. And what I find is getting people to buy into that vision, to really believe that this can become true, is super important in giving people a connection back to the work that they're doing. Yeah. I also think as a leadership team, we've got to be very clear about our prioritization of the work that we do together, right? And really clearly communicate the top three things in the order in which we do those three things, so that people really understand and move together, right? I think that's super important in any sort of transformative environment or in change management. Is giving people that level and providing that level of comfort and direction. And so that's, I'd say that's applicable to any industry, I would say.
Absolutely agree. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about a different type of transformation, still probably in the digital world, but obviously we're all tired of talking about the pandemic, but we're still in it. And the pandemic really either accelerated some trends or changed our ways of working. And I really want to talk about the investment in talent, or the change in your ways of working, and how you've handled that level of transformation to still reach, probably some really structured goals.
Yeah, I mean, we have all learned a lot of lessons, in a good and bad way. I think challenging times that we faced with COVID And during COVID, we learned a lot of the things that when we had to shut down our stores and call centers and ensure that our e-commerce organization rises to the occasion and we continue to run the business. Um, when it comes to people management, hiring, we definitely evolved and learned some of the practices, some of the talent that we saw operate and work. We saw our productivity go up actually. We also saw the type of talent that we were kind of limiting to certain locations. We opened up our thinking. We said, okay, we for some of the skill sets, it is okay if you want to have remote locations. We uh, we also saw in terms of the talent pool who kind of brought value to problem solving in very creative and innovative ways when we had to operate only through Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and so forth. I wouldn't say that it always works. Yeah, the in-person dialogues are super critical, and I think post-COVID we are kind of getting back to a hybrid model.
Yeah.
But I think we can achieve the best of both worlds if we can see what are the things which are required, what are the key roles and responsibilities which are required in person. How do we problem solve with creative talent across borderlines and across nations? Because in my team, we have people who are in Israel and people in India and people in the US. And I think the time zone advantage has allowed us to run a 24/7 more effective operation. We have been able to
Absolutely.
acquire talent in a lot of these locations, and it has been awesome.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There are some huge opportunities, for us in a global marketplace to be actually a global brand, right? And to have global operations more easily, or recruit talent that may not want to come to your headquarters every day, but you really need that skill set. I think for me, I've got to recognize having joined Shutterstock, I think this is my 4th or 5th month now, is being more than the head on the screen, right? And I've got to invest in getting to know the team, and how we work and what makes us tick, and passions, because those things that naturally happen in an office environment, that water cooler conversation, don't happen
Yes.
as easily on Zoom. And so you've got to find kind of that balance to invest in building those relationships, and not only focusing on the work or the objectives or the timeline, but actually focus on the people. And so
Yes,
that's kind of where my mind is at there.
absolutely.
All right, let's move on to our next topic. And we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but not necessarily in the way of recruiting a diverse workforce. I think we all understand that having more opinions, more shades, more perspectives, more experiences in our teams is of value. But I'm talking to a leader within the technology space, Mr. Wealthy, and I want to talk about maybe what are some of the ethical dilemmas with what you see in your technology space when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So one of the most fascinating things I noticed, I saw when we went completely remote, working with, Zoom meetings and such, is that you touched upon, Skip, the water cooler chart and building those relationships and so forth. And I think when it came to us completely working on remote for more than a year, um, one of the most fascinating things I noticed was the personalities within the teams who were introverts. And I would have like a water cooler meeting every couple of weeks. And I certainly saw like a large level of participation, much larger than I had ever seen before, in terms of the level of comfort people were in. And I think you talked about ethical dilemma. I don't know about if it is a dilemma or just a recognition that, hey, um, there are people from diverse backgrounds and they have points of views. And I think when it came to going back to the innovation and experimentation, we saw some amazing ideas coming from a very diverse group of people that otherwise would have been suppressed,
Right.
if we had not faced some of these things. So maybe it was a blessing in disguise, that we saw a diverse group of people, and this remote working actually um, sparked. So I was kind of, fascinated by that.
Sure. I 100% agree with that point. And it's something that is recognizable is that, in having a remote workforce, um, there's a comfort, the environmental comfort for our introverts to to speak up. And a lot of who we would classify as introverts hold a lot of knowledge and insight. We just got to figure out a path to kind of harness that. And so when you're working, at home at your kitchen table, it's a safe space for you to kind of more comfortably speak up and share that idea that you might not do in a conference room. So I 100% agree that, it's not just about diversity and skin tone, but maybe diversity and location, right? That can really yield some results. So that's an interesting perspective on diversity and what we kind of define as diversity. What are some of the things that you've practiced to bring a diverse set of ideas to drive experimentation and growth?
So one of the things I touched upon the fact that we have team members in different time zones in different countries as well. I wouldn't say that we have kind of nailed it or figured it out, but I think we are on a journey. And one of the things that we have practiced is encouraging ideas from different teams and different cohorts. It doesn't always have to be an idea that we want to bring in front of the customers and on AT&T.com or something like that.
Sure.
It can be a very simple process change, which is completely internal. But it makes a difference to our day-to-day lives. If something that we run AT&T.com, which requires a daily release, and we touch something on a day-to-day basis, and that means somebody is working that on a day-to-day basis, and if he or she is facing a problem, if another person notices and able to figure out how he can make her job easier, I think that is innovation. And one of the things that we encourage by doing this is, when I visited my team members in India, I would kind of say that, hey, what are some of the things that you notice? And you are a vendor partner. It doesn't matter whether you are a part of AT&T, you are a vendor partner, whether you're a full-time employee or a consultant, whether you are sitting in East Coast time zone, West Coast time zone, doesn't matter. Whether you're in UX department or software development, doesn't really matter. But encouraging that. So I would say that we are on the journey, Skip. I don't think that we have figured it out. There's a lot more opportunity there to bring the best in people and bring new ideas.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, many organizations, many businesses have had an awakening over the last 2 or 3 years with what diversity means and how we enact it for our teams and for ourselves. For me, I think what I have learned that I can personally do, right? It's not always about leadership or the CEO or your people's team. It might be about what you can do as a manager or as an individual employee. What I can do is kind of create space for voices to be heard, or recognize that there are some suppressed voices within my organization. And I tend to suck the air out of the room, right? Because I like to speak and talk, right? But I've got to recognize that, in me sitting back and being silent, and also making way for some of those voices to be heard, you get better ideas, and you learn more about people. And there's a leadership development quality in not being first to speak.
That's a very important point, Skip, you mentioned. In fact, when we operationalize this, we called it the extract, right? So it's a forum where it's like a Shark Tank, but we call it extract, like we are trying to extract value, and so people come into that forum every Monday. People meet from different organizations, and I consciously don't attend that meeting. After the meeting, I get some pings, right? Hey, Wolfie, can you chime in here? Can you kind of say that, we really want to do this idea or kill it, right? And I would say, no, I'm not gonna say that. You can't use my name. You got to work it out, right? You got to kind of socialize, win over. I think that's such an important point, Skip, you mentioned, is around, sometimes the hippo, right? The highest paid person's opinion in the room, and therefore it's kind of dominate. When it comes to idea and ideation and innovation, it's so important to cultivate some ideas. And there may be something that you don't want to bend rules or break the rules on, and you got to socialize and so forth. But I think at a high level, you have to encourage that your voice will be heard, your idea will move forward. Maybe it's not going to launch tomorrow. It may be 2 weeks from now, but you're not getting killed in the process.
Right. I love that. Okay. So that's the last really question I have. Is there anything else you want to offer this audience?
No, I think we covered it all. The questions, that was very good breadth of questions, Skip, you covered.
Well, I got one more. What is your favorite Seinfeld episode then?
Oh, no soup for you.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to close out here. Thank you for those insights, Wealthy. And I feel myself and those who have turned in have a better understanding of the fast-paced world of marketing innovation. If you'd like to keep up with Wealthy, you can find him on LinkedIn as Wealthy Desai, and you can find me as Christopher Skip Wilson on LinkedIn as well. So I want to give a shout out to my comms team, Shrey Dasgupta and Aimé Lamont. Hopefully I'm saying that right, it's French, for putting this all together. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Thanks, Skip. Appreciate your questions.
Bye.
Bye, guys.